You were always a burden, my parents scoffed before cutting me off. Then die with your favorite son. I snapped. Turns out he left them broke and alone. As my mother's voice pierced through the doorway, laced with cold fury and a sense of finality, I didn't argue. I simply turned around and walked off. The night breeze brushed against my cheeks as I stepped down from their porch, years of emotional dismissal settling heavily in my chest. But I wasn't going to collapse. I wouldn't give them the satisfaction of seeing me break, not this time. I had always been the outsider in my own family, the one easily forgotten, the one they turned to when there was a problem to solve, yet overlooked whenever there was something to celebrate. Louis, my older brother, was the one who could do no wrong, the favorite, the charming success story, or so they believed. He was the constant focus of their world. Me? I was the letdown, the one who could never meet their expectations. And now it was finally spoken aloud, my own mother had cut me off. I reached my car, climbed inside, and just sat there. Not a single tear fell, no anger boiled over. Instead, a strange quiet sense of peace crept in, like maybe this was the best thing that could have happened to me. I started the car and drove away. I didn't look back. I had no idea where I was heading. After years of stretching myself thin to win their approval that was never truly within reach, I had never taken a moment to wonder what my life could look like without them in it. But as I passed the streets I knew by heart, a realization hit me: this wasn't a tragedy, it was a release. All those years my parents only involved me when it served them. Need someone to help cover an overdue bill. I got the call. Need a repair done around the house. I was their guy. Want a listener while they praised every one of Louis's achievements. Suddenly, I was welcome. But real care, real connection. That was never offered. I should have seen it coming. The first warning sign was when my mother's disappointment shifted into something sharper: contempt. At first, it was subtle, a dismissive voice, a jab about how my life was going nowhere while Louis was doing something meaningful. Then it got worse. I stopped getting invited. I'd find out from social media that Louis had a birthday party, one I knew nothing about. The last blow came just last week. I had just finished a draining shift when my mother rang. Her voice was unusually sugary, the kind of sweet she only used when she needed a favor. "Hi, sweetheart," she began in that overly soft tone. "We just need a small favor." I already knew where this was going. "We're helping Lou with the down payment for a new house," she explained, "but we're a bit short, just a couple thousand. You'd really be doing your brother a huge favor." My hand tightened around the phone. "You mean Louis, the one earning six figures who never helps either of you out?" She let out a disappointed sigh as if I was being unreasonable. "It's reasonable. It's different. He has a future, he's settling down. He needs stability. Well, you don't have those kinds of responsibilities." Everything clicked at once. They didn't just prefer him, they genuinely believed he was worth pouring into. I was just the fallback, the safety net. I said no, and that's when her true self came out. I barely finished my sentence before she launched into insults, calling me selfish, ungrateful, a failure, words that couldn't be unsaid. And now, 1 week later, she stood at her front door yelling at me to leave. For the very first time, I actually did what they asked. I walked away. I stayed awake all night. I lay on my bed in that tiny apartment, eyes fixed on the ceiling, surrounded by silence that felt unfamiliar but peaceful. No more phone calls, no more manipulative pleas, no more feeling invisible unless they needed a favor. I expected to feel numb, maybe even broken, but instead, I felt something else, something like weightlessness, as if I'd shed a burden I'd carried for far too long. By sunrise, I'd made up my mind. I was finished, finally done. No more texting first, no more holding on for a version of them that didn't exist, no more accepting their scraps. For the first time in as long as I could remember, I powered off my phone. I had never done that before. I was always bracing for the next "can you do us a favor" message, but not anymore. I channeled my focus elsewhere, toward creating something that belonged only to me, a life without their strings attached. The first step was getting my money sorted. For years, I'd been sending cash whenever they asked, sacrificing my own financial well-being just to keep them pleased. That ended right then. I checked my balances, figured out what I actually had to work with, and began for the first time planning around my own needs. I poured my energy into my job, picked up extra hours, not because they asked, but because I had goals, actual goals just for me. I also reconnected with people I'd sidelined for far too long, friends, coworkers, those who had shown me care and loyalty but had been pushed aside every time my family pulled me back in. The first call I made was to Fred, an old friend. "Dude, I thought you disappeared off the planet," he said with a laugh. "Where have you been?" "Dealing with some family chaos," I admitted, "but I'm through with all that now." He didn't press for details, just said, "Good. About time." And with that, something new began. Over the next few weeks, I focused on rebuilding my existence. My days no longer revolved around waiting to be summoned or included. I exercised regularly, went out more, made plans that weren't constantly interrupted by last-minute crises from my parents. For the first time in years, I felt like I was truly living. I thought that was the end of it, but then a month later, my phone lit up with a call. It was their number, my mother, the same one who had told me to leave and slammed the door behind me. I stared. At the screen, something felt different. I had a strong feeling about what it might be. I let it ring for a few seconds, thought about declining it completely, but something inside said this wasn't just another manipulation attempt. So I answered. Her voice came through unsteady, shaken, nothing like the icy tone she'd used before. "Bruce, please, we really need your help." I stayed quiet. Then I heard another voice in the background, my father. His tone was raw, uncertain, and strangely unfamiliar. "It's Louis," he said. "He screwed us, Bruce. We don't know what to do." I almost laughed. Of course it was Louis, their pride and joy, the one they trusted with everything, the son they chose instead of me. And now he'd left them behind. Still, I said nothing, let the silence drag on. My mother began sobbing. "We gave him everything, Bruce, every single thing. And he took it all, emptied our accounts, talked us into co-signing a loan, then disappeared. He won't answer. He moved to another state. He's just gone." I blinked. Louis, the golden boy, the one who supposedly could never fail, vanished. Honestly, I couldn't decide if I was shocked or if I had expected this all along. In hindsight, Louis had always been persuasive, charming in a cunning sort of way. He knew exactly how to manipulate situations to his benefit, leaving others to clean up the consequences. What I never expected was that my parents would eventually become his victims. My dad cleared his throat, a sound I recognized as reluctant. He despised relying on anyone, especially me, but the strain had clearly broken his pride. "Bruce, we're struggling. We're behind on payments for the house, the car, everything. We could lose it all." I reclined slightly, letting the weight of his confession settle over me. For so long, they treated me like a spare part, a utility only acknowledged when needed. And now, after casting me aside, they'd returned asking me to bail them out. The irony was suffocating. I inhaled deeply and spoke with an even tone. "I'm not going to help you." There was a long pause. Then my mother's voice cracked through the line, brittle and desperate. "What? What are you saying? You can't do this. We're your parents, Bruce. We raised you." I exhaled. "No, Mom, you raised Louis. You merely put up with me, and now you want me to fix the damage he left behind." My father murmured something under his breath, too soft to catch, but I didn't care anymore. "You made your choice," I said, calm and direct. "You always did. You chose him, and now you get to deal with the fallout." My mother began crying. My father unleashed a string of angry words. I tuned it all out and ended the call. And with that, I felt something I'd never experienced before, true release. I braced for guilt. They had conditioned me for years to believe that loyalty meant self-denial, that being family required putting their needs before mine. Once, I would have collapsed under that pressure. I would have let their panic consume me, make me second. Guess my boundary, but not this time. This time I felt nothing but clarity. I turned off my phone and leaned back in my seat, staring at the ceiling overhead. All my life, they had placed Louis high above, showering him with attention and support while I scraped by with whatever they spared. Never once did they imagine their precious son might betray them, but now he had. I carried on with my day, completely ignoring the flood of missed calls, voicemails from my parents, and even messages from distant relatives I hadn't heard from in years, each one trying to reel me back in, convince me I was being unreasonable. That evening, a message came through from a number I didn't recognize. It was Louis, feeling proud. Think this makes you superior. I stared at it, then smiled. No apology, no regret, no responsibility. Classic Louis. He wasn't upset about what he'd done, only that I wasn't stepping in to clean up after him. For the first time in my life, I savored the power of doing nothing. I typed one word, absolutely, and blocked him. The next morning, I woke up to a knock on my door. I sighed, I already knew who it was. Throwing on a shirt, I walked over and opened it. Just as I thought, my parents stood there looking shattered. They seemed like they had aged a decade in one night. My mother's eyes were red and puffy, my father, usually so self-assured, looked shaken, scared even. I leaned against the door frame, arms crossed. What do you want? My mother tried to touch my arm. I stepped back. Bruce, please, we didn't know. We never thought Lou would do this to us. I gave a humorless chuckle. You didn't think, really? I said. You mean the same Louis who's never faced a consequence in his life? The one who's made a habit out of using people since the beginning? My father tensed his jaw. This isn't the moment for lectures, he muttered. I stared at them. Then why are you here? I asked. Nothing, just quiet, because deep down they had no real reason, at least not one involving me. They hadn't shown up to mend anything or to acknowledge their part in any of this. They were there because they'd run out of other choices. I took a deep breath. I spent my whole life hoping you'd care about me the way you always did about him. I gave a slight shake of my head. But I see it now. I was never truly family, I was just the emergency backup. Tears streamed down my mother's face again. My dad dropped his gaze, saying nothing. I drew in a breath and straightened. Go back, handle it yourselves. I'm finished. And before either of them could respond, I closed the door. I stood there, still listening to the other side. I could hear my mother sobbing softly, my dad whispered something under his breath, probably swearing at me for finally saying no. But I didn't reach for the handle, I didn't feel the urge. Minutes passed, their voices faded, a car door slammed, then silence. I let out a breath, they were gone. And for the first time ever, I had truly shut them out completely, totally, for good. And I meant it. Every word. I walked back to the kitchen, brewed a fresh cup of coffee, and sat at the table. Just a normal morning. No guilt clawing at me, no inner debate, only calm. They'd figure it out. They always did when Louis made a mess of things. Maybe they'd call extended family, twisting the story until I looked like the villain. Maybe they'd sell their house and downsize. Maybe they'd finally realize the golden boy they poured their lives into had left them with nothing. But that wasn't my burden anymore. For the first time in my existence, I was free, and I wasn't going back. The days that followed were strange, eerily quiet. No more guilt-heavy calls, no frantic messages, no emotional weight dragging me down. I kept bracing for regret to crawl in, some soul-crushing sadness for finally cutting the cord, but it never showed up. Instead, I felt light. For the first time in years, I wasn't exhausting myself trying to hold their world together. I wasn't breaking my back to earn money I'd end up giving away. I wasn't staring at my phone, dreading another demand disguised as a request. I was finally living for myself. So I leaned into it. I poured myself into work, not because I had to, but because I wanted to. I accepted opportunities one once declined out of pure emotional exhaustion. I started working out again, something I dropped while being buried under their problems. I reconnected with people I had pushed aside, old friends, kind faces, relationships I couldn't maintain while dealing with my parents' constant chaos. And for the first time ever, I began thinking about my future, not just surviving crisis to crisis. Then, out of nowhere, I got a message. It was from my aunt, my mother's older sister. She heard what went down. She wrote, "Just wanted to say I get it. I understand why you did it. You're not wrong." I blinked, surprised. My extended family had always been neutral, never involved, never opinionated about my parents' favoritism. So why now? I paused before replying, "Thanks, but why tell me this?" A few minutes passed before she answered, "Because your parents are going around saying you abandoned them, that you owe them, but I know that's not true." I stared at her message, and something stirred in me. Not anger, not sorrow, just relief. Because finally, someone in the family saw what was really happening, and they didn't blame me for walking away. I read her words again, and let them settle inside me. For years my parents had shaped the story to make me look like the ungrateful, troublesome one, the constant failure who could never live up to Louis. Even now, after everything, they were clinging to the same tired narrative, but this time it was falling flat. I messaged back, "What exactly are they telling people?" Her reply came quickly, "They're saying you abandoned them, that you left them struggling after all they've supposedly done for you, that you're selfish, cold, and unthankful." I laughed under my breath. That was classic them. And do people actually believe that? Typed her answer didn't come as fast. Some do, but not all. Lou burned a lot of bridges. More people are starting to see your parents for who they truly are. That last part hit deeper than I expected. For years, it had felt like I was screaming into a void, trying to convince myself and everyone else that I wasn't the villain in my own family's drama. And now, finally, people were seeing the reality. "Thanks for telling me," I wrote, "but I don't care what they say anymore." And for once in my life, that was completely true. I set my phone down and took a breath. For most of my life, I'd lived in their shadow, always the spare, always the one expected to fix everything. Even after I cut them off, part of me still waited for guilt to creep in, for that tug of doubt to pull me back. But not this time, not anymore. I had spent my entire existence believing family was supposed to mean something, that you stick around no matter what. But family isn't supposed to feel like a prison. It shouldn't drain you until you're hollow, and that's what they had done. But I wasn't their backup anymore. I wasn't the one they could rely on when everything else fell apart. I wasn't theirs, and that fact was driving them mad. A few days later, they tried again. It started with a message from my mom, "Bruce, please talk to us. We're hurting. We need you. Family helps each other." I ignored it. Hours later, my dad called. I let it go to voicemail. Then more texts came, more desperate attempts to drag me back. "Bruce, we might lose the house if we can't get some help. Please, we have no one else." And from my dad, "So you think you're above us now, that you can just turn your back on your own parents after all we did for you?" I looked at the screen and shook my head. All they did for me, I thought, like what? Ignoring me for most of my life while Lou got all the attention and support. Calling me a failure, using me emotionally and financially while building their world around their golden son. The longer I stared at those messages, the clearer it became. They weren't sorry, not for how they treated me. They just regretted losing the convenience of having me around. They weren't after forgiveness, they were hunting for a rescue, and they weren't getting it. The next morning, I woke to another voicemail, this time from my dad. His tone was angry, barely keeping it together. "Bruce, this is your last chance. If you don't help us, you're done. We'll tell everyone you left us to suffer. You'll be alone. Is that really what you want?" I laughed. I'd already been alone for most of my life, at least where they were concerned. They thought cutting me off would hurt me, but I'd already walked away. I deleted the voicemail without hesitation. I thought that was the last of it, that they'd finally accept the fallout from their own choices. 72 hours later, another notification appeared from an unfamiliar number. "Bruce, it's me. We need to have a conversation. Louis." I gazed at the message for a long while. People, he was the last one I anticipated hearing from. At first I considered not responding, but my curiosity got the better of me. His reply arrived almost instantly. "I messed up, all right. I realized I made mistakes, but I really need your support." I exhaled sharply. Of course, this wasn't a heartfelt apology, this was an attempt to fix a situation. I chose to disregard it. A few hours later, yet another text appeared. "Louis, do you think you're superior to me now that you can just stand aside and watch our parents struggle? You're pathetic." And there it was, the real Louis. The moment he understood I wasn't going to rush to rescue him, the false humility disappeared. I smirked to myself, shook my head slightly, and then blocked his number. The following morning, I awoke feeling lighter than I had in years. No anxiety, no bracing for another guilt trip, no burden pressing on my chest. I was finally liberated. For too long, I had allowed them to define my value. I had spent years attempting to demonstrate that I was just as worthy of love and respect as Louis, but the reality was their validation had never been necessary. I had always been enough, they were simply incapable of recognizing it. 7 days passed, then without warning, one last message arrived. This time it was from my mother. "Bruce, I honestly don't know what to say anymore. I never imagined you would abandon us like this. We relied on you, we are your family. But I suppose that means nothing to you." I read the words carefully, waiting for any reaction, anger, sorrow, remorse. But there was nothing, just resolution. For years, I had longed for an apology that would never be given, for them to finally acknowledge me, to truly see my worth. But they never would, and that was all right. I no longer needed an apology, I no longer needed anything from them. So I typed a final response: "You made your decision long ago, now you must live with it." Without another thought, I blocked her number too. That was the final time I ever heard from them. Perhaps they assumed I would eventually return, begging for reconciliation. Maybe they still saw me as the fragile, desperate child who would do anything to earn their approval. But that version of me no longer existed. In the months that followed, my life flourished in their absence. My career thrived. I traveled for the first time in years. I reconnected with old friends and built meaningful relationships, not ones forced by obligation but ones chosen freely. And above all, I finally felt truly free.